bem. Donald, how are you?
Conrado, good to see you. Have you sorted out the fire alarm? It sounded like there was an alarm running earlier.
Pardon me? I didn't get you here.
I heard what sounded like an alarm in your office earlier. There was a noise. Doesn't matter. I'm
Yeah.
good.
Yes,
No, the thing, I'm gonna tell you what happened here. It's a car in the street.
Okay,
It was an
that's just
alarm.
life.
Yeah.
Every city is the same.
Yeah. So Bella is here. We're gonna meet all
very
together.
nice to see you again,
Good to see
Donald,
you too.
and good to have you speaking with us today. Last time we were together in London, May last year, and it
Yeah,
seems it was a long time ago, but it was not. And hope to see you again in person next month.
absolutely.
Donald, do you have Brazil on the world map behind you?
Oh my goodness. I have Africa.
Oh,
Just
that's good
excuse me,
enough.
just
Good
one
enough.
moment. Just get that sorted out.
Gente, toda palestra ele arruma o mapa com o país. Eu vi que era África, eu só estava ajudando ele. Actually,
Apologies, Conrado. You know, I always try to remind
actually,
to be a good host.
this was an assessment just to know if you know where Brazil is. Uh, so, Donald, the idea here is for you to share a little bit of your thoughts and your views on
Yeah.
the assessment that you do. We have some interesting Brazilian data, and this is the first keynote of the second day. Yesterday was great, so thank you again a lot for being here, and the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Conrad. I'll talk for about 20 minutes, and I think we have 10 minutes for Q&A. Is that right?
That's perfect. 25 and 10 is
Okay.
great.
Okay, great. So, as you know, I do this survey every year, and I'm going to take you through the slides about it, but I really want to make sure we have time for conversation at the end, and Conrado as well, if you want to jump in, or indeed Bella, jump in with your thoughts about what you think this means for Brazil. I would love to hear the answers, because there's no question that Brazil is different to every other country that participates in the survey. There's no question about it. We've been getting good data, thanks to Novi, for 3 years now from Brazil. And it's quite clear it's a unique country. And I would love to understand what's happening. So that's why I'm looking forward to Q&A, and also to any thoughts anybody puts into the chat during the conversation. So firstly, let me quickly go through the slides and just introduce the survey itself. A thank you to the sponsors and to the media partners who make it possible to run the survey each year. Going to look very quickly at these 5 things. We had a conversation about this, Conrado, and we talked about how the key things that are different in Brazil are reskilling and upskilling, artificial intelligence, and collaborative and social learning, and the views of Brazilians about those very different to the views of the rest of the world. So let's start with a quick look at the survey, and then we'll get into those things in the middle, 2, 3, and 4, and then at the end, the conclusions are quite brief. Also at the end, there's a chance to download the slides themselves, plus the PDF will be with Novi, and they will get that out to everyone who registers for this event. So to look at the results of the survey and how the survey is run, I've been asking this question: what will be hot in workplace L&D in the following year, for the past 10 years? And the format of the question hasn't changed. Actually, there are 3 questions that I ask. I'll talk about the other 2 questions later. But the key question is this one here. That's the one question people have to answer. It's a very quick survey. 10th year of doing it, people choose from a list of 15 options, and they have the choice of other as well. 4,000 people answered this year from 100 countries. And the votes are not spread evenly over the world. So if you look at the UK and Europe together, that is 50% of the vote. The rest of the votes are spread out, not enough from Africa, not enough yet from Asia, but each year we get more people. Each year our coverage throughout the world grows. Now, I try to make sure as each year grows that we have coverage geographically that's well spread out. But there's one thing to remember about how the votes are spread out on the diffusion of an innovation curve by Everett Rogers, which I'm sure you're familiar with. if you remember this curve, we're not spread out equally all over the curve. Most of the votes come from this part of the curve. The right-hand side, the innovators and the early adopters, the people who are excited about technology and who want to talk about it. Those are the people who respond to the survey. But that's okay. Actually, they're the people I want to hear from, because I'm interested to know what happens next. Which of the ideas they think are exciting go on to the early majority, go on to the late majority? Which of the ideas that get taken up? Not every idea that is hot today becomes widely thought about and used tomorrow. But it is true that everything which is in the middle of that curve, everything which is widely used, was once thought to be exciting by a few people. And my job is to try to find out which of these ideas make it across the curve to general adoption. I said there were 3 questions I asked. The second question I asked, which is optional, is which best describes where you work. And you can see here that most of the people, about half the people, work in workplace learning and development, and everybody else is split between education, vendors, consultants, or something else. And of the 250 people in Brazil, over 90% responded. You can see the split of the answers is very, very similar. Half the people come from workplace learning and development. All right. I'm going to show you the list of options now. I'm going to take a sip of water. Just have a look at that for a minute. Have a look at what these things are that I ask people to choose from. And then have a think yourself. Which do you think is the thing which is going to be hot this year? Just have a look and a think about it while I sip my water. The key thing here is that there is no right and wrong answer. It may be that in your organization, what's really important this year is mobile delivery or learning analytics or performance support. Each person, each culture, each country, each company has its own context. And that means that that's something that's right for you. But what I'm going to show you now is the results of the survey across 4,000 people internationally. And what did they think? Well, this is what the answers were like across the world. And you can see there's a table that's self-explanatory, really. There's the thing. The number in brackets is the position that that thing was at last year. So you can see number 1, reskilling, upskilling was number 1 last year. It got 12% of the vote this year, 12.5% last year, and 13% the year before. So the red arrow shows you that although it's in the same position as last year, the vote is down. And you can see from the rest of the table, some things are going up, some things are going down. I just want to show you the same table for the world without Brazil and Brazil next to it. Just one quick look at that shows you that there is a big difference. Brazil and the rest of the world have something very different on the top, and they have very different things throughout the rest of that table, but there are some key differences here, which is why we're focusing on those things in this presentation. The world puts reskilling, upskilling, and AI at the top. Brazil puts collaborative and social learning and personalization at the top. And you can see that distribution is very, very different. And it's only Brazil, where this is the case. No other country has quite such a big difference to the rest of the world. I'd be interested, Conrado, and everyone in the audience, to get your views about why you think this is as we start to look at the data itself. So let's start off looking at reskilling and upskilling. Let's have a look at what it means. Where does it come from? And I'd love your views on why Brazil's take on this is so different to the rest of the world. So there's the top of the table. The top of the table shows us that reskilling, upskilling is down from last year, but it is still very strongly supported. In fact, when I first put this on the table 2 years ago, it got the highest vote for 15 years. Let's have a look at that in a second. But first, let's just define what we mean by reskilling and upskilling. Reskilling, you have a job and you get new skills to help you go to a different job. That's reskilling. Or maybe you have a job and you get new skills to help you go up in that job to a new, better job, probably with more money. That's upskilling. That's it. New skills for your different job, new skills for your current job. For such a simple word, or words, that really are all about what learning and development does, it's strange that they should be right at the top of the table. The reason for this is that this is the Google Trends search for reskilling and upskilling, and you can see that they were pretty much going in a straight line until the middle of 2019 when they suddenly started taking off. What happened was people started talking about the need to get people skilled up for life after automation. That was the worry. Then the pandemic hit and it became getting people skilled up for life after COVID. So if you look at the graph, you can actually see points where things peak because there's a conference or there's a paper that talks about reskilling and upskilling. And it was actually this paper here, the January 2020 paper from the World Economic Forum, that really launched everybody in 2020 to think about reskilling and upskilling as something that they had to take seriously. And what happened was they started talking about it. All of the major consultancies started to produce reports based on this, and everyone was talking about it. Everyone talks about it. It stays in people's minds. At the end of that year, when I launched the survey for 2021, everyone has reskilling and upskilling in their mind, and they voted for it. In fact, they voted for it very strongly everywhere in the world. This is very unusual. Everywhere in the world voted for reskilling and upskilling in some form at a high level, apart from South America. So it's 13% everywhere, 14% for the things not in those circles, 12% down the Pacific, which is still a high vote, but only 9.3% in South America generally, and most of which is Brazil. And if we go on to this year, you can see the votes are not so homogenous. Here, everyone agrees. Reskilling, upskilling is important. This year, you can see that the vote is very different. In fact, if it wasn't for that very big 16.1% over in Malaysia and Southeast Asia, if it wasn't for that, then reskilling, upskilling wouldn't be so high on the table. The only thing that hasn't changed is that South America is still skeptical, is still putting only 9.3% next to it. So I would love to hear any thoughts that anybody's got. Conrado, perhaps you can help me with this. Why is Brazil so consistently different from the rest of the world about reskilling and upskilling? You can see the votes for the 3 years that we've got good data from with Brazil and the 3 years that we've had reskilling and upskilling on the table. When I launched the results in a presentation in Brazil in 2021, we couldn't quite find an answer for it, but you were suggesting there were other things that were more important in the Brazilian economy. That may still be the case. The gap closed a little bit last year, but it opened up again this year. It's still the case that Brazil doesn't think reskilling and upskilling is as important as the rest of the world. Let me move on then to the second thing that we want to dwell on during this presentation, and that's artificial intelligence. If we look now at the bottom of the table, I want to just draw your attention to mobile delivery. We know AI, if you remember, is right at the top of the table, but mobile delivery is right down there at the bottom. Number 15, it was 14 last year, it's coming down. And you might say, why? Why is mobile delivery on there at all? Because we all have mobile phones, we all use it for content all the time. Well, that's exactly what's happened. When I started the survey, back in 10 years ago, mobile delivery was number one. And since then, it has slowly come down over time. This is completely normal. This is exactly what happens. Something starts off as exciting and hot, Over time, it becomes less exciting. Mobile delivery has gone from being something hot and new to something that is general practice. It is standard. It's not always true that that's the reason for something falling. Curation started as something hot and fell down over the years, but it's not standard. If I look around, I don't see organizations doing a great job with curation. It is simply that it is something which is good and important, but probably more complicated than people thought. The question is then, if generally things fall over time, either because they become standard or because they fade away because they're too complicated, what about the trend for artificial intelligence? Well, it showed a classic trend. It started off, it got really popular, and then it faded away. Strangely, last year, you can see here, it ticked up a bit, and then this year, it exploded back up the charts. It jumped 4.5%, which is something unheard of. Nothing has ever done this before. What happened? What happened, of course, was the launch of ChatGPT. And if you look at the bottom left-hand corner of this, you can see that the date on there is significant. November the 30th, 2022. Here's what the Google Trends graph shows for ChatGPT. Nothing, because nobody had heard of it, and then it takes off like a rocket. It launched on the 30th of November. I launched the survey on the 8th of December. And of course, at that point, everyone was talking about it, and it shot up. Interestingly, though, the distribution of votes for ChatGPT is not the same for the distribution of votes for artificial intelligence is not the same across the 4 work groups. I've taken other off here. So the 4 work groups are workplace, self-employed, vendors, and education. Of these 4, just ask yourself for a second, which one do you think voted most highly for artificial intelligence? Have a think about that. You might be surprised by the answer. I thought it was going to be workplace learning development. Workplace learning development voted 6.9% for AI. Education voted 13.8%, twice as much. Graphically speaking, this is what it looks like. Education voting twice as much. And education, by the way, I look at the votes each day as they come in. Education had it at number 1 throughout the voting, almost. For workplace learning and development, it started here, it went up to 6th position and then actually fell away. There's something going on there. I don't understand why workplace learning development is not more excited about it. And you can see the distribution of votes across the world is very uneven, very uneven. And look at South America, 5.9%. Here's the data for Brazil against the rest of the world for AI. So AI has been following that general trend. It's gone down and bounced up, as we saw earlier. Brazil was about the same as the rest of the world in 2021 and 2022. So it's not like reskilling, upskilling, where there's always been a gap. But this year, Brazil just wasn't interested. I would love any thoughts you've got on why. And in terms of your nearest geographical neighbor on the survey, from South America, North America, from Brazil to the USA, you can see there's a huge difference there. Brazil putting it at 5.5 and USA at 10.8%. All right, let's close very quickly now by looking at collaborative and social learning. We've just looked at this table here that shows the difference between Brazil and the USA in terms of artificial intelligence. It's also massively different in terms of collaborative and social learning. USA has always put collaborative and social learning quite low down the table and always lower than personalization. Brazil has always put collaborative learning at number 1 and always above personalization. It's a very, very clear distinction. But it's always been there. If you look at the past for the Brazilian vote, this is just 2 years, but it goes back 3 years. It's the same thing. Collaborative and social learning, always number 1. It's interesting that personalization has jumped up so much this year. maybe people in Brazil are voting for personalization, because you see that last year it was number 6, this year it's number 2. Maybe they're voting for personalization rather than voting for AI. I don't know. But graphically, this is what it looks like. Brazil maintaining strong interest in collaborative and social learning against the rest of the world. As it falls off the world, it stays strong in Brazil. And the gap is there also with America, with USA, except the gap is even bigger. All right. That's enough from me. I'm going to just wrap up with the 3 slides to conclude here. And then, Conrado, I'd love your thoughts. I'd love any questions from the audience or any observations about why you think the Brazilian vote is so different to the rest of the world. Just to remind us, Brazil and the rest of the world have always had a gap when it comes to reskilling and upskilling. It closed last year, but it opened up again this year. For AI, there's that big hockey stick for the world as a whole, but Brazil, much less interested in AI. It never gets above 6%. I'd love to know why that is. Are people in Brazil voting for personalization, which did jump up this year in the Brazilian vote, as opposed to voting for AI? And finally, collaborative and social learning, always strong in Brazil and much, much stronger than the rest of the world. It's always number 1 in Brazil. It's never there for the rest of the world. That's the conclusions. Please feel free to use those codes to download the slides from my website. That just takes you straight through to a page with the slides on. And you can also follow me on LinkedIn using that other QR code on the other side. That is exactly 20 minutes, as I was briefed, Conrado. I hope that works for you. Tell me, do we have any questions, any thoughts about why that Brazilian data is so different to the rest of the world?
Actually, a lot of thoughts here. I was with Bella just talking about the data you showed us before. But I have one guess, and this is based on my perception of the market. And I would like to hear from you, your perception on if what I'm saying is correct, what could be the impact for the Brazilian L&D world. And my guess is that just we are not connected enough on what's going on with the business world, with the technological world. I mean, we are suffering so much just to make sure that we have all the instructional design on the table and ready to be delivered. And also we have so hard time trying to put people in front of a computer or inside the classroom that we're just doing the traditional stuff. And because of that, we are not looking either to AI and to see how this new technology could happen. Even though I think that if we do this today, probably the result will be a little bit different, a little bit. But regarding reskilling, upskilling, last year was the same. I think that we could be having a better look on the trainings that we are proposing. Why we are offering trainings without thinking in skills, I don't know. But I think that somehow is a way that we are not connecting with the zeitgeist or with what's going on with the world.
There's a lot in that, and you know Brazil better than I do, so I can't comment on whether that's right or wrong. Although, Conrado, I await my invitation to come out to Brazil to meet you and everyone and to speak to the audience. I'm still waiting that invitation. I can see for myself then. But you're probably right that there is a focus in Brazil, or more accurately, in the people who responded from Brazil, there's a focus on delivery, on getting stuff done and making things happen. And maybe culturally also, that's why collaborative learning is seen as being so strong. One thing I did notice in the Brazilian results is that showing value is much lower in the Brazilian results than it is for the rest of the world. It's about 3.5, 3.6% for this year and last year. The rest of the world puts it typically at about 6.5%. That suggests to me that the idea that you deliver something in order to show an impact on the business isn't as strong amongst our population in Brazil. It may be that people are concentrating more, as you say, on just getting the job done, getting the training materials in front of people, getting them into the classroom to do things, and that the next step, showing value, isn't there. It may also be that people are less connected with the rest of the world. But don't forget, there may be other reasons as well. So Ireland, for example, voted 4.3% for AI this year. And now Ireland is quite a technologically adept country, right? They've got a lot of smart people there. Why didn't they vote more for AI? When I spoke to them about it, they said, it's very simple, Donald. We had a lot of tech layoffs in December and January when the survey was running. People were much less concerned with AI. And if you look at the reskilling, upskilling vote, that jumped up in Ireland. It fell away in the rest of the world. And the reason it jumped up was that that's what people were concerned about, giving people a chance in a new job. So I think there's always the chance there's some local explanation that we don't know about. And I think the best thing to do, Conrado, is to invite me out to Sao Paulo so I can investigate for myself.
That's interesting. Bella, you have a question.
You are more than welcome coming to São Paulo.
Thank you.
I don't have an answer about why AI is not that important for us right now, but I also have a thought around how expensive it is, technology sometimes in our country, so maybe it can be part of an answer. And I also have a suspicion around some companies that were early adopters and they try it and the results at the beginning were not that good. So instead of keep trying, they realized maybe it would be better to change the strategy. But I have a question for you. We see a lot of trends, a lot of topics going up and down. But what, from your point of view, is like crucial for learning, no matter the country or no matter the time?
That is the question. Thank you for asking it. There are two things on this survey which don't change. Everything else goes up and then comes down, but two things that don't change. One is consulting more deeply with the business, and the other one is showing value. These two options have stayed in the middle of the table for the past 8 years. They haven't shifted. They have actually moved up very slightly for the past 5 years. Those are the two things that are really important. The technology is only ever a tool for getting the job done. The two things that really matter for me are consulting with the business to understand what you should be doing, going and doing that thing, and then coming back and showing value. The fact that these two things are slowly moving up and certainly not fading away on the table, that gives me hope that actually learning and development is moving in the right direction, and understanding that we need to be strategic about what we do and not just follow the latest fad. It's a great question, Bella. Thank you for asking it.
Well, when you say that you have hope, it means that we are not there yet. And we are talking about getting there and be connected with the business for such a long time. I mean, probably before the century, we were already talking about we need a seat on the table of the board and whatever. Why, in your view, why things are not changing in the speed that they could be changing, considering that the world is changing and we need more learning, and learning as a business? Why we are not there yet?
Two reasons. And you're right, this has been a problem since I've been in this field, which is since the late 1980s. Two reasons. The first reason is people's perception of learning, and the second is the people in learning development themselves. People's perception of learning is that, learning is training, training is like school, it's a classroom. Now, it's a simplification to say that, but it is absolutely the case that most people who do not work in learning development believe that training means a course, means a physical space or an online environment where you do things. Learning is a lot more than that. As L&D professionals, we know that. The problem is that everybody goes to school between the age of about 5 and 15, probably later. So everybody in the world pretty much goes through the same process for the formative years of their life. It's not a surprise that regardless of class, regardless of wealth, regardless of gender, regardless of ethnicity, almost, they are going to be educated in the same way, and everybody therefore thinks the same way, and nobody questions it. And so when it comes to learning and development, the idea is still that it is a process we put people through. They leave the building, they go and get processed, they come back, and they can do their job better, hopefully. On the other side of that, there's the issue with learning and development itself. I think we need to be a bit stronger, a bit more challenging, and we need to tell people, yeah, that's not how it works. Things are different. We understand how people learn. We understand how performance is associated with learning. And we know it doesn't just happen when you attend a course, although that may be important. There are lots of ways it happens. And I'm going to sit down with you and talk you through how learning and your business needs are related. Those conversations which we need to have, we need to be tougher and more challenging about having those conversations. Right at the beginning of this day, there was a bunch of people talking about something in Portuguese. I didn't hear the words exactly. I don't speak Portuguese, Brazilian, I'm sorry. But I caught words that sounded like courage and being brave. I think that's the answer. The big change that we need to do is to be braver and be more courageous to make the change happen.
And this, I guess I mentioned, if I don't, it's even better, that we are talking about courage as the main talk and the main thought and the main inspiration for this our festival. I think we already know that we are not there and we have to change. So being bold is something that I truly believe that is relevant and important for our team. Bella, we have a question from the audience.
Yes, we have it. Yesterday, I did a similar question to Riaz Shah, and I'm not going to tell you his answer, and I would like to hear from you. From your point of view, since upskilling and reskilling are still a hot topic in the world, which skills do you suggest are trends for the year ahead, apart from AI?
Firstly, I have a lot of time for Riaz. I think he does fabulous work at EY, and he's a great example of somebody doing a brave, courageous learning and development professional. I will try to be brave myself and guess what I think the skills should be for the coming year that we need to be developing. And I'm talking about people generally, not people in learning and development. If you want me to respond about learning and development, I'll do that in a minute. So the things that I think we need to help people develop on are all the skills that make us unique as human beings. Machines are undoubtedly going to be doing a lot of the work that we could do last year. White collar work that normally somebody would be doing from secretarial through to really high level work in an organization. A lot of it can be automated. What can't be automated is communication, network building, and understanding people. And for me, those are the skills, and of course, what supports them, particular communication. Those are the skills which, above all, we need to be developing this year and next year and beyond.
And then let's create something on top of this question. And what about the upskilling of the L&D position? What are the new skills that we as L&D people need?
If we're going to be brave and courageous and make a difference to the organization, we have to be better at having difficult conversations with people. We have to be better at having conversations where we go in and we say, we are facing an issue at work. It's either a short-term performance issue or a long-term capability issue. This hasn't necessarily been spotted. I have the data that shows me there's a problem, and I'm going to present you with a plan which I think will help us get through that. I'd like to talk to you about that. At the moment, very few people in learning development are having those strategic conversations because they don't have the data on the one hand, and on the other hand, they don't have the courage to go in and have those conversations with the business. But it's not enough to go in and simply tell people stuff. It's crucial that in building a plan, in understanding what the business needs, you're capable of listening really well. So somebody says something, you listen not just for what they said, but what they didn't say. What are the gaps? What are they leaving out? If you don't say anything and you just leave a gap, will they then come forward and say something more? Or did they use a word that you need to reflect on and get more out of them? Those listening skills and conversational skills, very, very akin in some ways to some of the coaching skills, are crucial for us to have tough conversations with people where firstly we understand what the problems are, and then we do the difficult thing of saying, I know you want a course. I know you think the answer to this is training. It's more complicated than that. I'm a learning and development professional. Let me tell you how we can fix it. So the three things there are understanding the data, being able to listen in a conversation, and then being able to have the tough conversation to say what really needs to be done.
We have some vendors here in the audience, and usually we don't not make a lot of questions for them. So I'd like for you to help us to help them. I mean, what do you think that are the roles of the vendors in this new L&D world? How they could be helping the learner and the companies in this new environment that we are seeing?
If you're on LinkedIn, you'll know that you are deluged with top tips about how to get AI tools to do your marketing for you, to write messages on LinkedIn, to write emails for you. I think that's a really bad idea. I think it's the same answer that I gave earlier, which is about focusing not on AI, but on the skills that make us human. If you're a vendor and you're trying to develop short-term sales, but also a long-term relationship, the best thing you can do is to develop a sense of trust with your audience. That you have to find ways of helping them understand this complicated and difficult world that we're in at the moment. My advice to the vendors, get one step ahead of what's happening. Understand AI, dedicate people to understanding how this is going to change the world, and then offer that as a free service of consultancy for your customers and potential customers. And that way, you've got a great way of starting a relationship based on your expertise, and that will develop the trust for short-term and long-term sales.
No, thank you a lot.
We would love to keep the conversation going on. I think we have many questions, but we also have another very well-known speakers. But you are more, again, than invited to come to Brazil.
We're going to make this happen.
We will make it happen. And I'm sorry to be so cheeky and talking about it. I'm looking forward to it very much.
So, and see you in some weeks. As we finish here, I'm going to tell them about our learning conference, Learning Technologies, and there are going to be a lot of Brazilians there for sure. Thank you a lot.
That's great. Look forward to it. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
See you in London. Bye.